Hello, you're watching the business news from the Business Channel here in Dubai. I'm Stephen Marnie. The debt-ridden and troubled airline Gulf Air has announced a rescue plan to fly back into profit within the next 3 years. But exact details on how it plans to stave off bankruptcy haven't been revealed. Debts of almost $150 million will be written off, and it's to get an $80 million cash injection from its owner states Bahrain, Oman and Abu Dhabi. Qatar pulled out of the consortium last week. But faced with increasingly fierce competition from Dubai's Emirates airline and already cutting back on jobs and routes, that's less than a third of the $272 million thought to be needed to stop Gulf Air going bust.
Gulf Air unveiled a new and bolder image of itself with a series of positive changes that should see the company recover market confidence and share following the recent.
Anthrax has been detected on mail bound for the World Bank headquarters in Washington. The organisation's 1,200 employees are being advised to stay at home. Meanwhile, Dubai is to play host to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund annual governors meeting next year, and planning is well underway here. Their top officials are in the Emirate to make sure that all systems are go. The Dubai International Convention Centre will stage the event, and it's still being built, along with new hotels, with 183 member countries. Financial leaders and businessmen from across the Middle East are in Dubai to discuss the future and reality of Arab GCC joint ventures. There were 830 in the past 30 years, and the aim now is for a big improvement.
Despite the rapid...
Well, Israel's government has been plunged into a new crisis after Prime Minister Ariel Sharon sacked 4 ministers. He took action against the Shas members of his coalition for voting against an emergency economic package. The dismissals impact severely on Mr. Sharon's majority in the Israeli parliament and leave him vulnerable to a confidence vote that could trigger elections. The sackings come into effect later this week. Well, let's cross now to Lenore van der Zee, our correspondent in Ramallah. Lenore, this puts Mr. Sharon on rather rocky ground, doesn't it?
It certainly does. His majority goes from 85 seats out of 120 down to 60 seats out of 120. This is still considered a technical majority. However, he's vulnerable to any kind of disagreement between the Likud and Labour parties, which are the 2 major parties now in the government coalition. Any disagreements could cause early elections, and that could leave him very vulnerable, possibly to defeat. However, due to his calculations, his main rival in the Likud party, Benjamin Netanyahu, would not have a chance to sufficiently prepare himself for elections, thereby almost ensuring Sharon's defeating him in the elections. Now, also, Labour would not mind early elections because it would prevent an up-and-coming leader in the Labour Party, Chaim Ramon, from gaining enough power to challenge Ben Eliezer for his candidacy for the prime ministership. So Ben Eliezer is also happy with that. Now, it's likely that Sharon would still beat Ben Eliezer in any election, but it would also ensure that Labour would still be a part of a coalition government along with Likud, and things would probably remain status quo.
Well, Lenore, he must have realised what was happening when he took the decision to fire these ministers for not agreeing with the package. I mean, I'm not quite sure what the details of the package were. I don't know whether you know, but certainly he must have known that he's put himself into this position. Do you think he's done that so that there will be an early election with a view to getting back with a coalition and still going forward with the rest of his political policies?
It seems like that's very, very likely. He expelled the Shas ministers after they refused to support an economic package. They refused to support it because it takes away aid for less fortunate Israeli citizens, and particularly from the religious parties within Israel, which of course they represent. This is why they declined to support the bill. Now, they've offered to go into negotiations with the Prime Minister so that they can remain a part of the government. The Prime Minister, Sharon, has flatly refused this. So he certainly knows exactly what he's doing. And from all accounts, it seems that he does not mind the possibility of early elections at all.
Well, in terms of the Palestinians' point of view of what's happening in Israel right now, obviously the Palestinians are not too fond of Mr. Sharon at the best of times, but also they're not very fond of Benjamin Netanyahu either, are they? So if there are early elections, there's little chance, really, of the Palestinians being happy with any new leadership in Israel. Is that the case?
That's definitely the case. The Palestinians are never happy with any kind of Likud leadership. They are the far right. They are the ones who have expanded settlements, initiated a lot of the military activity. However, they're not satisfied with labor either, who are seen as the more left wing in Israeli politics. They have also expanded settlements. They have also initiated military activity, conducted assassination, things like this under Prime Minister Ehud Barak. So it seems they're not going to be happy whoever leads because they simply have no opportunities for peace with any of these leaders.
Well, finally, with the economic package that Mr. Sharon was trying to put into place, what sort of impact is the vote against Mr. Sharon going to have on Palestine itself? Because clearly the Palestinians do rely very, very heavily on lots of raw materials and so on coming through Israel.
Well, the crux of the economic plan was to divert much of the funds for needy Israelis into military funds to vamp up their operations in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. So Palestinians certainly aren't happy with the package either, because it entails more money going into equipment and training for reservists. So it's certainly a package the Palestinians weren't happy about. It didn't seem to touch much of the overall economic sector in a way that would affect Palestinians.
OK, well, let's wait and see what happens later in the week when the sackings do take effect. Lenore, thank you very much for joining us today. That's Lenore van der Zee, our correspondent in Ramallah. More business news now, and the rapid rise of the yen against the dollar is causing increasing worries in Japan. Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi is fretting, and so is his Finance Minister Matsujiro Shiokawa. And he said that the yen's rise was unnatural and warned that Japan would step into the support of the troubled currency if it thought the market was being manipulated. The strong dollar threatens to derail Japan's economic recovery by hitting the vital export sector. But most analysts doubt that intervention is justified and unlikely at the current dollar-yen level. So, as we're there, let's take a look at the Asian markets, and computer-related stocks led Asian markets lower, as you can see there, amid concerns about prospects for a recovery in the United States. That's Asia's biggest trading partner, of course. Tokyo stocks ended a 5-day winning streak, and property stocks on Hong Kong's Hang Seng bore the brunt of selling as the market fell 2%. And declining semiconductor prices hit South Korea's Kospi index, as you can see there, with a downward spiral of 3.25%. And the Straits Times not really following too much of the trend there, or they're not doing terribly well, still way below the 2000 benchmark there at 1730, but a slight upward movement there of 0.34 of 1% at the closing bell today. Well, it's time to go to London now, and the famous high street retailer Marks & Spencer has had a torrid time over the past couple of years. But at long last, its plunge in popularity for both shoppers and shareholders may be over, as Anna Wardley of AFX News explains.
It is. It's very good news. Marks & Spencer's, they've posted their full-year profits this morning, up 31%. It is good news because we've been waiting for some good news from Marks & Spencer's. It looks as if the turnaround is finally getting underway there. They've got new ranges of clothes in from George Davies, the founder of Next. And they seem to be selling really well. They've even got David Beckham promoting some of their men's ranges now. So they've got the celebrity endorsements. They're definitely helping them out. And this morning in the city, Luke van der Velde is coming across as Lucky Luke because he's finally getting some results there for the high street retailer.
OK, well, let's turn to recordings now, which is what EMI was famous for. They're famous for a lot of other things as well. They've had to let a couple of artists go in recent times because of poor profits performances. And the story's not that much better for EMI today, is it?
It's not. No, their profits are down as well. They're down 40% this morning. They let Mariah Carey go. They had to pay her off £38 million to get rid of her. And it's still not looking good. They're in a difficult market. It's a saturated market. Their recorded music sales are well down. They've got problems with piracy, the rise of the internet. People are getting music from elsewhere, and it's really weighing on their sales. One ray of hope's coming from Robbie Williams. They're hoping to negotiate another contract with him over the next few weeks. His last album sold over 5 million copies, so he's a big star for them. So hopefully they'll get something with him sorted and things might turn around.
We'll keep a close eye on that then, I guess. The consumer credit is showing a record high in the UK at the moment. Is that because the high street is back to being confident, or is that an aspiration of low interest rates at the moment?
Well, it's mainly driven by mortgage lending. We've got new figures through this morning showing that mortgage lending has risen to new highs again. It's up this morning. The Council of Mortgage Lenders got some figures out. It reached £16.9 billion in April, which is up 31% from last year. So people are rushing to get mortgages before rates go up, because now there's an expectation not if rates will be risen, but when it's going to happen. So basically, everyone's trying to get their mortgage quick, and although the Bank of England have said they're worried about the prices of houses, the prices are still going through the roof, so it looks like rates are going to be going up sooner than we thought.
That's Anna Wardley there, talking about the high price of living in the United Kingdom. Well, while we're in that part of the world, let's take a look at the markets, and the FTSE, as you can see, is up about 1% with a couple of hours trading left to go. In Frankfurt, the DAX is benefiting from a rise in specialty chemicals group Dugasa, I think that's how you pronounce it, after a takeover from coal group RAG. And the CAC Caron is being supported by gains. Vivendi, the media giant, is rumoured to be mulling over a breakup. We'll have more on that in a few minutes' time. But you can see the three main indices that we cover there are all showing an upward spiral today. Well, I'll look now at some other business stories making headlines today. Dutch telecoms group KPN is showing the first signs of a much-needed turnaround. First quarter core profit rose 18%. To $963.7 million. That beat analysts' expectations, I should say. I'll get my tongue around this one yet. But after a write-down, the former Dutch phone monopoly posted its sixth straight quarterly loss of $320 million because of its stake in its loss-making internet venture KPN Quest. Vivendi International, as we mentioned earlier, board members there are weighing a plan to split up the media, telecom and utility conglomerate after a dive in its share prices. Under the plan, media assets, including Universal Studios and Universal Music, cable television and publishing, would be hived off into a new entity. BNP Paribas, France's biggest bank, plans to spend as much as $8.3 billion on acquisitions over the next 4 years to boost profits. The bank expects to reallocate capital towards its retail and asset management activities, so the two divisions represent over 60% of the total group by 2005. Argentina's peso has sunk against the dollar, no surprise there, and that's on fears that the government's takeover of three troubled French-controlled banks could lead to a collapse of the brittle financial system. Tens of thousands of anxious bank customers have taken to the streets in protest at rising unemployment and poverty.
Three of Argentina's main banks, which have over 350 branches, are facing major cash problems. These people are lining up outside their branch not to withdraw money, but because they want to go to work.
Oil prices fell around 2% today, pressured by a large and unexpected jump in US crude supplies because of strong imports. US light crude futures lost 54 cents in Asia to $24.79 a barrel, retracing Tuesday's 25-cent rise in New York. The American Petroleum Institute reported a rise in US crude inventories by 6.3 million barrels. The industry group said gasoline, the seasonal demand barometer in the summer months, slipped 760,000 barrels to 218 million barrels, leaving stocks 4% above levels at the same point last year. Although oil supplies appeared adequate to meet global demand, already eroded by an economic slowdown, the market kept a nervous eye on Iraq's export flow and also tensions in Kashmir. Loadings of Iraq's UN-monitored oil sales were stopped for a second day. Baghdad blamed a tough UN price policy for scaring off its customers. So let's take a look at the US markets. On Wall Street, stocks have soared after healthy sales at Walmart and an upbeat outlook from Avon. That's as the market rebounded from the sell-off earlier this week. In the first hour of trading, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 1%. And as you can see, the Nasdaq there trading quite evenly. And the Standard & Poor's showing an upward spiral there, standing at 1045, about an hour after the opening bell in the United States today. And you can see there, all three indices that we cover in the United States are showing a little upward slide at the opening bell today. Well, Egypt's airports are in desperate need of improvement if you've ever been there, but the government can't afford the massive investment needed. So the private sector has been invited in with build, operate and transfer projects. There have been some success, but the critics say that the real reforms need to transform the infrastructure are just simply not happening.
Egypt's airports are a tourism nightmare. They leave much to be desired. Tourists are not usually impressed by the lack of up-to-standard facilities built on.
Well, they're trying to bridge the digital gap in Jordan. eJordan is a 3-day conference which has attracted 400 local, Arab and major international IT players. The aim is to produce a national plan for e-development such as e-business, e-banking and e-learning.
Officials, IT entrepreneurs, businessmen and industrialists were mandated with submitting a national action plan to speed the process of what many labelled as e-revolution. According to officials, the 3 pillars of the country's e-revolution plan include...
Let's go on to other news now. The United States has decided to donate 100,000 tonnes of wheat, rice and other food to North Korea, the nation that President Bush accuses of being part of an axis of evil. The decision was announced ahead of a visit by US envoy to North Korea for discussions about opening the first substantive bilateral dialogue since the president was elected. North Korea depends heavily on food aid to feed its 23 million people, ravaged by years of economic mismanagement, flooding, drought and harsh winters. World leaders and the United Nations are being urged to change their tactics in the war on hunger. Protesters have gathered in Rome for a 4-day international food summit.
Some 40,000 protesters from all over the globe converged on the Italian capital and aired grievances over genetically modified food and other agriculture issues.
Well, whilst we're in that part of the world, let's look at the stocks. Key Asia bourses regained some lost ground today as mauled technology stocks recouped some losses. Tokyo's benchmark Nikkei stock average edged up on gains in technology companies, including Canon and Sony. In Hong Kong, gains in property developers Henderson Land and Sun Hung Kai Properties propped up the Hang Seng. In Seoul, stocks ended higher for a 3rd session in a row as growing World Cup fever helped lottery and telecoms counters. And in Singapore, shares edged up on buying mainly in technology firms, banks and blue chips. And you can see all 4 major Asian indices that we cover on your screen now. Well, as we all know, China also has huge oil and gas reserves, and now a gas pipeline in northwestern Zhejiang province is attracting huge overseas investment. The ambitious scheme will link the Yaha gas fields in the remote desert region to the industrial heartlands of Shanghai. But the pipeline could be vulnerable. Beijing is stepping up its fight against a strong separatist movement in the mainly Muslim region after recent terrorist attacks.
Though at a preliminary stage of construction, the multi-billion-dollar 4,200 length of pipeline will eventually span the entire width of the country. Workers are battling extreme conditions to ensure the infrastructure is successfully put in place.
Well, Washington is keeping up the pressure on Tehran. An American lawmaker has introduced a congressional resolution denouncing a project between Canadian oil company Shear Energy and Iran's national oil company. The $80 million contract signed last week was the first major foreign investment in Iran's energy sector since the September the 11th attacks. This also tests US law prohibiting US companies from doing business with Iran. The business entrepreneur who built Tyco International up into a huge conglomerate has been charged with illegally avoiding more than $1 million in sales tax. Dennis Kozlowski, who resigned as chairman and chief executive after news broke of the investigation, pleaded not guilty and was released on $3 million bail. Well, those of you interested in motor cars will know that the Range Rover is a familiar sight around the world. No more so than here in the Gulf. And it's a market where there's intense competition amongst four-wheel drive manufacturers. Well, Britain's Land Rover, which is now owned by US giant Ford, is getting powerful help from Germany to launch a new-look Range Rover. BMW is supplying the engine. The price, just over $70,000.
In a market chock-a-block with four-wheel drives, Land Rover.
And you're right, it's now time for World News, and here's Natalie Shariat. Natalie.
Thanks, Steve. Swimmers have been warned to stay out of the sea in southern England. No, it's not the threat of hypothermia or a shark attack, but a sexually frustrated dolphin. Nicknamed George, he's been trying to lure unwary humans out to sea to mate with them. He arrived off Weymouth in Dorset 2 months ago after following a trawler across the English Channel. Authorities fear the amorous bottlenose dolphin will get very rough with swimmers and may cause them to drown. You have been warned. And that's it from me. Back to you. Yes, that is a funny story.
A sexually frustrated dolphin named George will get very rough with swimmers and may cause them to drown.
Stay out of the water, that's all I've got to say.
What can you say? It's time to go. Well, let's take a look at the headlines before we do. Armageddon Day, a massive car bomb blows up 16 bus passengers and tanks and helicopters attack Jenin. Oil prices fall around 2%, pressured by a large and unexpected jump in US crude supplies because of strong imports. And trying to bridge the digital gap in Jordan, the eJordan conference attracts major international IT players. Well, from Natalie and me, that's it for this half hour. And from the rest of the team here in Dubai, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Goodbye.